To week 1 conference call. This is Friday, May 6th, 2000. Now, with that being said, I do have 2 very quick announcements to make, and then I'll start turning to your questions. So again, if you're on the live call right now, please do me a favor and start typing those questions in. First announcement is that Steve Vale, one of our participants for our May A to Z class here, posted a little note saying that he would love to have a study buddy if anybody's interested in going through the materials and basically kind of brainstorming and working together and all of that other stuff. He's looking for that. I think that he found one taker, but if anybody else is interested, Steve is looking for that. And of course, if you go to, it's actually topic number 7, and these topics are in no particular order. It's just the order in which I actually enter the topics. But look for topic number 7, conference call for week 1. It's also linked to, by the way, in your week 1 conference or course outline. Anyway, go to the conference call, and then right under the video will be this section here, and you can see what Steve has to say about Study Buddy. So he's looking for somebody, and there you go. Steve did that for you. All right, next up, I want to also let you know I got an email from my web hosting provider that told me that, or actually they said, you know, hey, we're looking at doing some maintenance and moving you over from one server over to another. Nothing's really going to change. There's nothing for you that you'll actually have to do. Just know that your server could be down for as little as 15 minutes. There's a very, very rare occasion that it might exceed 30 minutes. But the chances of that happen are slim to none. And that is tonight, Friday, May 6, 2011, 10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time. So with that being said, there you go. I don't think that my site will be down for probably any more than 15 minutes. But if it is, do know that it is a scheduled thing, and I have full confidence in my web hosting provider. And so there you go. That's my note there for you on that. Now, with that being said, I do see the questions starting to come in, and let me take a look and see what the first one is. The first one comes from Ian, and he is asking, he says, I am interested in hearing more about developing the content of a podcast. You talked about Google Reader, love that. Any other ways in which you do this? Very good question, and I am going to show you exactly some other ways that I do this. So I go to google.com. /reader, /reader, and of course I read books and other things, but I do go to Google Reader, and here are, and I'm a very minimalist when it comes to the amount of content that I consume personally, and so I'll go to Mac Stories here, and I can see there are 4 brand new stories. Untethered Jailbreak, now available for 4.33. That's not something I'm going to be interested in talking about on my podcast. Youku to replace pre-installed YouTube app. No, I could care less about that. Do you miss Pac-Man versus PC? No. Okay, so basically there's nothing here, nothing here at all that would interest me. Nothing I'm going to talk about on my show. If I go to Mashable, first tweet from the top of Mount Everest. Don't really care about that. Nothing there. Nothing there. Nothing there. Nothing there. But let's just assume, however, there were one of these stories that I really did care about. So what I would do here is I would look at this story and let's just say, wow, this is something that I definitely want to talk about. So I'm going to click on this. It takes me to this Mashable story. All right. And so here's a Mashable story. And what I'll do, and I use a special program called the Google Shortener. All right. And in fact, in all of the weekly outlines, you're going to see all the URLs start with goo.gl, and maybe that's a good place for me to kind of tell you a little tip here of something that I use and that you can use in your show notes. But you go to goo.gl, and this is a Google shortener. And here's what you can do. You can actually go to Samsung or this website on Mashable. Now look how huge that URL is. If I take that long URL and I copy it or cut it out of there and go into goo.gl, and then I paste this right here and hit shorten, it gives me a shortened URL right there. So now I can take that shortened URL and then I can paste that into my browser, and it's going to take me right to that Samsung story. So then, of course, I can go to a Google Doc that I have set up. And here is my Google Doc, and this is my show notes. And what I'll do is I'll go into and say, okay, Podcast Answer Man, here's a news story that I found. Mashable, let's just put story title here, link or dash link, boom. There we go. And now that's ready for me to put into my show notes. It's ready for me to talk about and queued up. In fact, there really won't be very much down here at all because we just did live shows yesterday and I cleared everything out. But here you go. This is a perfect example right here. So you can see Help I Got a Mac. Apple to release Mac OS X Lion through the Mac App Store. So if I actually click on that, it's going to take me here. I just click through, and now there we go. That's an Apple Insider story. Next iPhone might have over-the-air updates. I just click that and go through here, and that's going to take me on through to that story. And that's how I basically set up my show notes. So anything I find online, I could be just browsing, I can be following on Twitter, whatever the case may be. If I find a story that I want to talk about, I just come to my show notes inside of my Google Doc, and I put those in here like this. And in fact, when I'm finished with the thing here, I'm going to put in this episode, Chris and Cliff discussed the following. And of course, thankfully, they'll do spell correct there. And of course, then I'll just take that, and then my VA will take that information, and she will go and post my my show notes for me. So if I go to helpigotamac.com, anyway, so we go to helpigotamac.com, and if we scroll down here, you're going to see in this episode of Help I Got a Mac, Chris and I discussed the following, and she puts them in these nice bulleted items. And if there's a link, she'll put the link in there. And so there you go. That's exactly how we do that. As far as where I go for stories, my inspiration for what I cover in my podcast, just a very few RSS feeds that I follow. And then, what I see on Twitter, what I'm reading in books. Oftentimes I'll be reading in books and I'll decide to do something. And of course, let me just show you this, twitter.com/Cliff's Kindle. I have a Kindle, and the Kindle has the ability to take things and share them. So, for example, let me just go down to something here. Of course, most of this is all going to be Bible stuff. So let's see if I can find something that's not from the Bible. Actually, it's probably pretty much all going to be from the Bible on my Kindle right now. So let's just take one of these. Let's just say I wanted to do an almost daily devotional, and I'm looking for some inspiration. And so a word of advice for all the morning people out there. Okay, that sounds like an interesting topic. So I can actually click that link, and it's going to take me to what I highlighted. A loud and cheerful greeting early in the morning will be taken as a curse. So there you go. If you're a morning person, try not to annoy other people. How's that? Seek wisdom more than money. If you click this, it takes me to here. It says, wisdom is even better when you have money. Both are a benefit as you go through life. Wisdom and money can get you almost anything, but only wisdom can save your life. And so, there are different ways that I go about getting material and content for my shows. But one of the things that I will tell you, and I get that question kind of a lot, is like, how am I going to come up with content for my shows? Well, my recommendation is that if you're going to do a show that is related to a topic that you just can't stop talking about. Is there any kind of topic or any kind of interest that you have so much that all the people in your life are sick and tired of hearing you talk about it? And that's exactly when I actually go to start a podcast. That's how I got started. People in my own community, my own friends, they didn't like the TV show Lost nearly as much as I did. So they were sick and tired of hearing me talk about it. And so I got behind a microphone and started talking about it. And there I found there's an entire world of people who were interested in hearing me talk about anything and everything I ever wanted to talk about. Because I had passion for that topic, I spent hours looking at screen captures for Lost and all kinds of other stuff. And so I desperately wanted to seek out information because I'm that passionate about that topic. When it came to, my virtualassistantpodcast.com, this is another thing. Maybe find a topic that is something that you have a lot of experience with, or maybe that's a bad phrase. Let me give you another phrase. How about a new journey that you're going through, or a journey that you've been through? All right. So, for example, I started the virtualassistantpodcast.com, and when I started this, I wonder if the archives are on here. If it does, yes, it is. So I started this in April of 2010. Now, I will tell you, I had never had a virtual assistant until January of 2010. That's when I hired my virtual assistant. So I had only had 4 months of experience. Before that, I didn't even know what a VA was. I had heard about them, but I had a lot of misconceptions, and I was completely wrong about what a virtual assistant was. And after 4 months of having a virtual assistant, I was passionate about what my virtual assistant was able to do for me. So 4 months into this thing, I decided I'm going to do a podcast. And in fact, before I recorded my first episode, I went out and sought a sponsor, and I got that sponsor. They signed up for a 3-month contract. They continued their contract, and I did 38 episodes, and they were actually devastated when I told them that I was done producing the show after 38 episodes. I mean, they literally begged me to continue to do the show, and I told them, no, I'm moving on to other things I'm more passionate about. And the thing is they wanted to actually take over the show. It's like, can we buy this property from you? And I'm like, no, you can't. That's not a part of the deal. This show is my property, and the reason why this actual page right here still gets hundreds of new hits every single week. People who will actually go in and listen to the most recent episode, hear that it's actually the final episode, they'll go back and download all 38 episodes, listen to them all the way through, and throughout the 38 episodes, they've actually got to know a lot about me and my journey and how I do my business, what my business is. And this thing is leading people to the Podcasting A to Z course. It's leading people to my Podcast Answer Man show. It's leading them to my Generally Speaking production network. I mean, this thing continues to drive traffic to me. But where did I find content for this episode? I found content in right here. Check this out. Let me see if I can find some titles for you. Okay, the worst week of 2010 was when my virtual assistant that I had for 11 months actually told me she was leaving the company. Interview questions that helped me discover my next virtual assistant. There's another one. The most devastating news in my journey. Benefits of hiring a virtual assistant over an employee. Why did I decide to hire a VA? Why didn't I just hire an employee to work for me? Can I hire a virtual assistant to do things that I'm not able to train them to do? Oh, this is a good one, because this one right here tells you how I came up with this idea. Oftentimes, I will give a voicemail feedback hotline or ask people to email me questions. And if they do that, that also gives me great content as well. So you can actually ask your audience, what do you want to know? What do you want me to share? And that can lead into some content as well. So, Ian, hopefully that is somewhat helpful to you as well. All right, so let's get into these questions. Please tell us about the service you use where listeners can call into your voicemail line. Is it Google-based? Cost? How do you import it into the show? Thanks, Cliff. All right, so Glenn, great question. The service that I use is called BroadVoice. If you go to broadvoice.com, it ends up, for me, I'm thinking I pay somewhere around $15 and some odd cents per month. But they have a less expensive plan. And now you can actually, if you have an Android phone or you have an iPhone, you can actually set up for service with them without buying any special equipment. and you can actually set things up to work with your phone. And because of that, you can use this to actually make phone calls and do some other wild things. But the only thing I'm using Broad Voice for is just to manage my voicemail. And so if I log in to my Broad Voice account, I'll just show you real quickly how I have this set up. I have my settings here, and it says you have none voicemail settings. There we go. Right here, status for voicemail is turned on. And check this out, voicemail or forward after how many rings? 0. That means I don't even want my phone to ring, not once. I just want, if you dial my voicemail number, which is 859-795-4067, that's my Broad Voice number. If you call that number after 0 rings, you're going to be sent to voicemail. And then what I tell it to do is once a message has come, I want to forward that message to feedback@gspn.tv. Now let me go ahead and open up my email here, and basically what I have is Gmail, and I set it up to do filters. So anytime feedback comes in to feedback@gspn.tv, it automatically skips my inbox and gets put into this folder or label called feedback. And so now here is a message from Allison, and I'm going to assume this is related to the Hunger Games, and I just download that. All right, and then once I download that, I have a WAV file, and I can actually preview it by clicking the spacebar on my Mac, and it's loading up.
Hey, Cliff and Steph, this is Allison calling from Columbus, and this is for the Hunger Games. I know that's a big shock. I just wanted to call, of course, and
all right, so what I would do here is I would actually title this HG Hunger Games and Allison. All right, now I have a piece of software called Soundbite, SOUNDBYTE, and it's all one word, Soundbite. It's made by blackcatsystems.com, and I'm going to pull over this software right here. And let's see here. What I would do is I would just take this right there and just drag and drop it onto there. And so when I'm doing my shows, I click the button here.
Entertaining, educational, and encouraging content that makes a difference.
And then, of course, once that's done, I hit my intro music. And I talk over that and I can turn down the volume on my mixer, or if I wanted to, I could turn it down here. And then when I'm ready in my show, I actually say, okay, so next up we have a call coming in from Allison. Allison, take it away.
Hey, Cliff and Steph, this is Allison calling from Columbus, and this is for the Hunger.
So there you go. And that's how I get my clips into the show. And again, that's Soundbite, and it is blackcatsystems.com. This software, by the way, is available, I believe, for both Mac and PC. And let's see if I can find that. You just go to blackcatsystems.com. Their site is ugly as all get out, but their software works wonderfully, and it's $39. So I highly recommend this program. It's a great program. I use it all the time. All right, so let's see here. So basically, that's how I get the clips into my show, and that's how I receive my voice messages. Now, technically, that voicemail is still in my email, and so I'm going to go ahead and just minimize that for now. So anyway, going back, though, I want to let you know that you can find a free solution if you choose to do so. You can use Google Voice. So if you go to google.com/voice, you can sign up for a free Google Voice account. They'll give you a free phone number. It's yours to use for life. And anytime somebody calls, you'll get an email if you tell it to send you an email. But not only that, but those voicemails will come in. Now, this one I actually labeled this person a spammer. Somebody called in with one of those automated things, and I'll just go ahead and hit play so you can hear what.
Recording and calling people for you. If you're open, press 2 now to be transferred to my voicemail. To be removed from the list, press 9.
Yeah, so it was a spammer, so I put that little tag on there. Now, let's just say that somebody had called into my voicemail line here and left me a voice message for the show. While I go to Google Voice and I just go in here and do download under the More tab, Okay, so I just clicked more, and then I clicked download, and that downloaded the file right here to my desktop. I can preview it.
And calling people for you.
And so I can actually label this spammer. There we go. And then I could bring my software up here, and I could just drag that right over top of the other thing, or I could just open up another tab down here, or just drag it over any of the buttons. And I can say, hey guys, check out this spam message I got.
And calling people for you. If you're open, press 2 now to be
Okay, so that's how I get voice messages. Again, Google Voice is free, absolutely free. Broad Voice cost me about $15 and some odd cents per month. And I believe Stacy Westfall in our class, she was in our March class, I believe she signed up for Broad Voice as well. You might be asking yourself, why would you choose Broad Voice, when it costs as much as $15 a month or however much it costs? Why would you do that if you can get Google Voice for free? And the answer to that question is that the audio quality of the recorded call from Broad Voice is actually superior to that of Google Voice when it comes to playing the audio back in your show. So you get a better recording of the voice message coming in from Broad Voice. All right. Moving on to some other questions here. Let's see here. Where do you get your podcast partners? Okay. Let's see here. Where do you get your podcast partners to share the load? This comes through basically networking with people, getting to know people, building relationships with people, and I basically find people that I really know share a passion or interest as much as I do. I'll give you some examples here. Help I Got a Mac. We talked about that show earlier. Help I Got a Mac is a show that I do once a week. My co-host is Chris Biting. I'll tell you where I met Chris is I had just purchased a Mac for the very first time. It was about maybe 2.5, 3 years ago. And I loved it for 2 weeks. I hated it for about a month or two. And I was doing a podcast sharing my journey in learning how to use a Mac. And that's why it was called Help I Got a Mac. And right around episode number 10 or 11, things started to get very negative, and I was actually calling it my white piece of plastic trash that I wanted to throw across the window or throw across the room. And Mac fans all over the world were screaming. They were upset. They're like, "How can you say that? This is the best platform ever." And I'm like, "This is a piece of trash, and you can't do anything. It costs so much money. Blah 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 blah." And one of my friends introduced me to his friend Chris Biting. And Chris, basically, he was the reason why he introduced me. He says, "Listen, I've got a friend of mine. His name is Chris. He loves the Mac. This guy he's a total Mac fanboy. But he used to work at an Apple store as one of their Genius employees. He was one of the guys who fixed everything. If anything went wrong, you took your stuff to the store and he would fix it for you." He says, but he doesn't work there anymore. But he loves helping people understand how the Mac works. And I'm like, I'd love to talk to him. So he actually Skyped with me one night, and I asked him a bunch of questions. He said he answered them for me, and I said, "Hey, would you like to come on my show? My show, it's called Help I Got a Mac." He goes, "Yeah, I'd love that." And so he came on my show, and we hit it off. I mean, it was just really good because at the time I still wasn't a Mac fanboy, and he was, and so it was kind of like a Mac versus PC commercial. And we just had a lot of fun with it. And as you can see, we've now recorded 166 episodes of that show. Social Media Serenity, Eric Fisher is actually in this class. He might even be here on this call. But Eric Fisher and I met as a result of the Lost podcast. He started listening to our Lost podcast quite some time ago, pretty much right after we first started podcasting. And in fact, Eric Fisher was one of the very first people that I ever brought into a live show. It was probably like episode number 5 of our Lost podcast, and we brought him in via Skype and a bunch of other people. And I just had a really great relationship with him. We did a live podcast meetup here in Northern Kentucky. He and his wife drove all the way down from their home to come to our meetup. We've just had a really good, close friendship over the years and just really stayed connected with one another. And one day, I don't know how it came up, but he wanted to know if I would do a show related to social media. I said, would you be interested in doing it with me? I can't remember exactly how that got started, but we decided to do a show together, and that is actually Social Media Serenity. And let's see here. Yeah, it looks like I'm having all kinds of fun stuff with my redirects. But anyway, Social Media Serenity, and that was 88 episodes ago. Father Roderick, he and I do a show called Balanced Living Weekly, and he lives in the Netherlands. And actually, Father Roderick was one of the very first podcasters I ever listened to. And I remember the very first time I ever got to talk to Father Roderick, I felt like I was talking to a celebrity, and I was so giddy and excited. And Father Roderick and I actually started to be mutual sources of inspiration. He has a podcast network. I have a podcast network. He would talk about how he's been inspired by me. I would talk about how I'm inspired by him, back and forth. Then I got into podcast consulting. He started sending a lot of people my way for consulting work. He invited me to come out and speak at a conference that he was holding for Catholic New Media in Boston. And he and I actually got to teach together. Matter of fact, if you go to my Facebook page, I believe my Facebook profile, one of the pictures that I always have up and running all the time, was the very first time. This is the first time Father Roderick and I ever met face to face, and we had known each other for years. And I guess once we were there, or as soon as we got back, we said, why don't we do a show together? And so that's how I find my co-host. I do it through building relationships. And so I find somebody, and then what I do is I look at a passion that the two of us share together, and then we go from there. The other thing I look at when I'm actually creating a podcast is, what if there's something that I'm passionate about, but I don't know enough about the topic to be a good source of information. Or maybe I just don't have enough passion to stay on top of everything there is to stay on top of. And that's like with Business Tech Weekly. There are all kinds of tools that I learn about from other people. And when I learn about them, I'm like, wow, this really boosts my productivity. Now, I don't have time to go out and research new tools every single week to come to Business Tech Weekly. So there's a friend of mine, his name is Andy Traub. I got to meet him, and I learned that his business is actually helping people understand technology tools to make their businesses more productive and more profitable. And I'm like, well, I'll tell you what, I got a great way for you to market your business and help me create a new show if you're interested. And he's like, you've got this built-in audience? Yeah, this is a great deal. It was a win-win for both of us. And so that's how I came up with Business Tech, or we came up with Business Tech Weekly. So definitely turn to friends that you meet over time, and stuff like that. And, of course, I've got a couple shows that I do with my wife, and so she's a built-in co-host. And if you can get your spouse on board, that's a possibility there as well. All right, do this. Okay, here's a question. I know that you have emphasized the importance of focusing on one show, and I totally understand this. However, I have already started a show, only a promo, episode 0, but I have one in the can, and still want to keep it going. And I have a show that I'm working on as my second show, and I feel a strong compulsion to get it going. The reasons are complicated, but the short version is A, I'm very passionate about the subject, and part of the reason I wanted to get into podcasting in the first place. B, the topic is hot and nobody else is doing it, which surprises me. And let's see here, but there it is. And C, I feel a sense of urgency because if I don't do it, someone else will, and I really want to be the first. Okay, first and foremost, if you are that passionate about doing two shows, I'm going, and Steve, let me tell you something. I've worked with you, and I know that you have exactly what it takes to fire and go full bore with two different shows. I think there is value in only doing one and starting it, specifically as it relates to basically letting your audience know that you're 100% devoted to them and the show that they're listening to. But if they can come away from that sense, knowing that, you do other shows and stuff like that, but if they don't feel like this is just a side hobby, a side job for you or a side hobby for you, chances are you're going to be just fine. The other thing is I just want to say there's nothing big about being the first to anything. I want to tell you right now, I was like the 5th to the lost podcasting world, and I quickly rose to number 2. And it wasn't very hard. In fact, it's not very hard to rise to number 1, 2, or 3 in a particular niche field, even if there are 80 or 90 episodes of content. I'll give you a perfect example of this, and I'll just show you real quickly here. I'm going to go to the iTunes store, all right? And let's see here. I am going to do a search for Hunger Games, all right? Now, if I go to do a search here for Hunger Games and I click on podcast and click see all, here's the thing. You've got the Jabberjays Hunger Games podcast, the Hunger Games podcast, Fireside Chat podcast, Hunger Games Mockingjay Talk. You've got the Harry Games. I don't think that's it. But there are several, podcasts out here already related to Hunger Games. Now, you don't see mine yet. And the reason why, although you do see the GSPN.TV all-inclusive already in here, and that's because if you click on the all-inclusive feed here, you're going to see number 9 in the list is the Hunger Games podcast that I did. So even with just one episode, I already show up in the search. But here's what I'm going to predict. Come back to iTunes in probably within the next 15 days, and I want you to see that I will be number 1 in this list. I will be the first one that shows up under Hunger Games. And the reason why is because my audio quality is going to be second to none, and stuff like that. So let me just go into Hunger Games here. Now, I happen to know Anna in Indiana, so I do not think any less of her. Matter of fact, she's a member of the GSPN community, by the way. She only did one episode in September of 2010, so it's not going to be hard for me to pick up the other thing. And by the way, here's some other podcasts. The District 13 Uprising. That's also Hunger Games podcast, and so are all of these other podcasts over here. So there's a lot in the field, but listen to the audio quality here.
Talk shoes. Recorded live.
Hello, and welcome to the first and maybe last Mockingjay podcast talk. My name's Anna, and this podcast is more of an informal thing. I was persuaded by a friend on Twitter.
Okay, so there you go. You would not believe the number of podcasts out there that are recorded telephone conversations. And it's just crazy, but it's just the way that it is. Recorded telephone conversations. And so when people hear that, and then all of a sudden you go and you click on, actually, let me do this because my show is in iTunes. It's not in the, it just got approved yesterday. And once your podcast gets approved, by the way, as soon as you get approved by iTunes and you actually get listed in their store, it takes another 4 or 5 days before you start showing up in searches. So here's what it will look like when people come to my listing inside of iTunes. Now, anyway, when people actually come to my show, I'll just give you an example. This is what they hear compared to that. Hunger Games Fan Podcast, episode number 1.
Entertaining, educational, and encouraging content that makes a difference. This is GSPN.TV. Join the community.
Everybody, and welcome to a brand new series here at GSPN. So there you go. It doesn't take much to immediately rise to the top of the list, especially when you have audio quality and production values behind you. The other thing is it's actually a good sign when you actually have an idea for a podcast and you notice that there's already 10, 15, 20 other podcasts out there. That's a very good sign. And the reason why that's a good sign is that, number one, it means there's tons of interest, not only in people listening to the content, but it also means there's tons of interest in people podcasting about the content. There's a demand for it. And not to mention the fact that what this does for me is it gives me the opportunity to do this. I can actually now go and subscribe to District 13. Let me go to District 13 and see if they have any recent episodes. No, they did this back in September as well, and they stopped. But anyway, if there are other podcasts out there that are still going, here's somebody that did one in February and stopped. Here's somebody that is relatively recent, as going back to February, but they stopped after February. Anyway, what you could do, and of course I can see how some of these are series, so you know they're kind of designed to end at one point anyway. But anyway, you could actually build relationships with other podcasters. You can network with other podcasters in the same area. You can interview them. There's a chance they might interview you. You can cross-promote each other's shows and stuff like that. And if all of a sudden, for example, I don't know, Jabberjays, let's just say they've already built an audience of about 9,000 people subscribed to their podcast. Now, they haven't produced anything since 2010. I don't know if they have any subscribers left. But what if they actually did a really good job of building a relationship and says, listen, when the movie comes out, we're going to come back for more. So stay subscribed. Well, all of a sudden, what if they say, well, gosh, man, here's this new Hunger Games podcast with Cliff and Stephanie. You know what? Can we interview you on our show? And I'm like, well, yeah, that'd be great. And so we go on their show and talk about how we came across Hunger Games, what we think about it, and they can promote our podcast. And the next thing we know, right off the bat, within 2 or 3 episodes, we could have several thousand subscribers. So being the first isn't always the greatest, but certainly I can understand the desire to want to be, first to market. There is something to be said for that, but there's also something to be said for the fact that other people are out there doing it. And as far as, somebody else is, nobody's doing it and I want to jump right on it. Well, I mean, there's going to be a ton of podcasts out there that you could start that you may want to jump right on. If I don't do it, somebody will. Well, the thing is the question is how much time, energy, and passion do you have to spread across all the projects? I'm a huge proponent that if it's your first podcast, stick with it for 6 months before you start, minimum 3. But Steve, trust me, I know you well enough to know that you probably would be able to give 120% effort on both podcasts at the same time. And so I think it'd be possible for you. All right. So the next thing Steven says here, so the question I think I need to make an exception to a very good rule. And yeah, there's always going to be exceptions to the rule, so that's not a problem. I may need to make a few others if this is all based upon reasons I want to get into podcasts in the first place. I'll allow your points in before you record your first episode. Yes, so I have no problem with that whatsoever. And so Steven says, so for now, I want to do these 2 shows to start. Do you have some suggestions on how to make this exception as far as workflow? I don't want to abandon the first show. That is something that you must not do. That's the big problem. You have, in my opinion, if you want the original show to continue, you cannot abandon it. With whatever frequency you've been releasing episodes, you need to continue that frequency. And with whatever passion and level of enthusiasm and the amount of value, you need to continually keep that level of content going. If it decreases if it decreases in its consistency or value or production, any of those things, you're going to do nothing other than harm the original brand. Okay. So basically, with that being said, how do you set it all up? That's done through multiple categories, and I think that's all going to be covered in WordPress for Podcasters, which is coming up next week. So, Stephen, if you still have questions after going through WordPress for Podcasters, where I talk about setting up categories, then let me know, and we'll continue to come back to that in next week's conference call. Stacy says, I tried setting up Google Apps so I could share a calendar, etc., using the link from Pam and ran into issues setting it up. It keeps preventing me from verifying it. Any advice? I wondered if it would work if I was using the paid version. You know what? They just made some changes, and I just got an email from Google Apps saying that they've changed some things, but I'm grandfathered in on their free account. So unfortunately, Stacy, I don't have any advice for you right now in that area. And so I'm sorry about that. But you could actually still share a Gmail calendar. You could actually create like a yourhorsecareer@gmail.com account, and that way you could have a calendar just for that if you wanted to. I personally prefer having Google Apps myself, and so with that being said, I would contact Google Help to see if you can find it, and usually you can find some good support help for the Google Apps. So let me just do Google Apps Help. Let me see what that is. I think they probably use a group. So here it is. It is google.com/support/A. Okay, and so if you go to google.com/support/A, you're going to find a lot of known issues and some other things, some configuration, setting things up. And then, of course, it says over here, you got a help forum, and then you've got get support. So that's what I would do is go through there and see if you can't find the help that you're looking for from Google. It's google.com/support/A for apps. All right. Alrighty, so let's see here. How do you keep your content fresh, i.e. you do 100 episodes, and do you ever feel like you're running out of stuff? Great question, Ian. I want to let you know it all comes back down to the shows that I'm passionate about. Virtual Assistant Podcast, there were 38 episodes. I ran out of steam after 38 episodes. It's not that I'm still passionate about having a virtual assistant, but I really did feel like, you know what, the idea was to help the small to medium-sized business owner understand what a virtual assistant is, to break away from all of the stereotypes, all the misunderstandings, all the misconceptions, and learn how to use a virtual assistant efficiently and how to make it change your productivity to actually make your business more profitable. And I feel like I answered everything I needed to answer. And so after 38 episodes, I was done. And so I stopped the podcast. Now, Podcast Answer Man, I just released episode 208. I could talk about podcasting all day long, every day, 7 days a week, and I would never run out of things to talk about. And in the 208 episodes, I have people who actually matter of fact, I can guarantee you this week, within the next 7 days, let's put it that way. Within the next 7 days from today, I know for a fact that at least 1 to 3 people will find Podcast Answer Man for the very first time, and will go back and listen to all 208 episodes. And they will listen to all 208 episodes within the next 3 weeks. I know this because I get the email every single week from the people who are doing it. And they said, wow, I can't believe this. And the thing is that if you go through there, are there some things that are repeated? Yes, there are, because it's a lot of users' questions and stuff like that. But the thing is with 208 episodes, that's not a problem. If I talked about it 72 episodes ago, I answered the same exact question. Chances are I've learned something new since the last time I've answered it, and so I'm giving fresh, new responses. So it really does depend on what your topic is, how passionate you are about it. I mean, when it comes to podcasting, I'm always being confronted with clients who have questions and problems that I've not addressed, and then I have to find answers and stuff like that. And when I do that, I'm learning new stuff. I've got new things to share. And so, I always keep it fresh just by keeping up on the topic. And again, for the Help I Got a Mac, I've got somebody else who's more passionate about the Mac than I am. And so I put him in charge of keeping up on content. But then even I'm actually subscribed to a couple RSS feeds that daily give out like 10, 15, 20 different news stories. And if any of those catch my interest, I also add those to the list. So, that's how I keep fresh content. There we go. Stacy Westfall on voicemail. How do you encourage people to call in? They seem to be reluctant to call in when invited. Or let's see here. When invited, how long does it take to get that ball rolling? This is a great question. I get this a lot. And yes, it takes a very long time to convince somebody to call you in. How I get the ball rolling is, I get email questions. People send me emails, and I say, I'll tell you what, I would love to give you a full answer to that. In fact, if you were to call that in on my voicemail feedback hotline, here's the phone number. Call that question in, and I will include the answer in the next episode. So, I mean, that's one of the ways that I got the ball rolling. Another way that I could think of getting the ball rolling is asking a couple of your friends, in the industry. So say, listen, I'm starting the show. It's going extremely well, but, people are really nervous about calling in. And let me tell you, they are nervous. They're freaked out by the idea of calling in, getting their voice recorded, and messing up. Okay. So if that's the case, if they mess up, they're going to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to sound stupid. Well, the thing is they need to hear you take in questions of other people who have had the courage to call in, who maybe did mess up, but you actually didn't make them look like a fool. They need to actually hear how you react to people calling in, even if they ask something that may seem super simplistic. And Stacey, I know you would never do this, but man, people are waiting to see how you respond to questions. Like, it's like somebody might think, well, gosh, I got a stupid question. What is an RSS feed? I can't ask Cliff Ravenscraft that. I mean, everybody knows what an RSS feed is, except for me. But I'm not going to call that question. That's just stupid. So if they actually hear somebody else say, you know what, I'm sorry, you laugh if you will, but I still don't know what an RSS feed is. And if they call in and they ask that question and I respond to it and I say, hey, it's not a problem. You know what? Most people who hire me today don't know what an RSS feed is. And I have to explain to them. So this is a great question. I'm glad that you asked. And when I do that, that person who has been waiting for weeks and has never had the courage to call and ask in that question, the next time they have the question, hopefully they'll pick up the phone and call it in, knowing that you're not going to belittle them, because that really is a fear that they have. And so you could actually call friends of yours in the industry and say, listen, you know what? The podcast is going great, but I'm trying to get the wheel. I'm trying to, prime the pump, trying to grease the gears here to keep it moving and start moving. Would you call in and say, hey, Stacey, this is so-and-so from such and such farm, from, such and such horse farm, whatever. I have a question for your show. I heard that when you and Jesse first got started, you had this. Can you elaborate on that? I mean, give them questions to call in. And that may seem inauthentic or something like that, but it's not, as long as you don't say, hey, well, thanks for calling. I mean, you don't have to tell your audience that you asked somebody to call in, but you don't want to say, well, I'm glad he decided to call. I mean, I don't know how to handle that, but I've never done that personally, but if I needed to, I certainly would. And there's nothing wrong with, by the way, begging your audience to call. And I do that. I do that in every episode of just about every show that I produce. I beg people to call. Memorize your phone number, 859-795-4067. By the way, tell them, hey, this is a voicemail. It's not going to ring my house. It's not going to ring anything else. If you call this number, it's going to go straight to voicemail. You can call it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It doesn't matter if you're in Australia and you're 12 hours ahead of us. No big deal. Call right now. Program it in your phone, 859-795-4067. Mention it at the end of every single episode and keep doing it. And eventually, it will start working. Stacy says, I find myself using my Edirol in Audacity for all of my audio, not using Soundbite. I am patching them together in Audacity. When I do try Soundbite, the audio comes in too low. Okay, well, let me just tell you what's going on here. Number one, there's no problem doing it the way that you're doing it. Although, I will tell you that there's an easier way. I mean, well, that was the wrong one. It's not an easier way. It's easier after you get used to it. It's a whole lot less post-production. Let's put it that way. There are a couple things. If your audio is too low, then that means that perhaps you maybe want to take your Edirol and turn the gain up. Why not go ahead and do this? Go ahead and turn the gain on your Edirol all the way up to 80, which is the maximum. All right? And then you might be saying, well, wait a second. You know, our audio input on the Edirol is set at 47 right now, and we're already hitting 12 to 6. If I turn it up to 80, we're way too loud. Yeah, that means that you're going to need to go into the gain on your mixer, or the trim at the top of your mixer, right below where the knob right below your XLR plugs. You'll need to turn that down. And so set your slider or volume control to 0 at the bottom, or to where it's supposed to be at its loudest level, and then talk into your microphone and turn the gain down on your microphones until you get to 12 to 6, and then you should find yourself with the audio coming in from your audio clips coming in much louder and clearer. The other thing that you might want to consider is this. So let me take a look at Soundbite here, and let's do this. Let's say I get this voicemail that comes in, and I'm going to open my Dropbox here, and of course it opens up on another screen. So if I go to Show Prep, I'm going to open that up, and let's go into, let's see if I have any of these that are actually low. Preview. It's waiting.
Hey, Cliff and Andy.
Actually, that's pretty loud. Let's all of these probably are going to be significant.
Hey, Cliff.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I have something over here because I haven't played with these just yet. So let's try this one.
Hi, Cliff. This is Gene from Texas.
Okay, so Gene from Texas. His audio is not very loud. So if I go over here and play this.
Hi, Cliff. This is Gene from Texas.
See over here on this. Look where those levels are. His levels are right here, so it's about 30% of where it could be. So what I could do is I could open this up in Audacity, or what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Adobe Audition because it's what I use. So I'm going to open this up, and before I try to play it back in my show, I am going to take this recording. I'm just going to highlight the whole thing, and I'm just going to go and do a hard limit here and apply that. And there you go. Now that's much louder. So now if I do File and Save, and let's bring this up here and hit Save, and hit, yeah, we'll just go ahead and do that. And let's see, want to make sure I've got this right selected there. Now if I play him, actually, try that again.
Hi, Cliff. This is Gene from Texas. I guess this is for the podcast.
All right. So before he was hitting right about here, and now he's hitting up here. So there are two different things that you could do. One, you could, obviously you can adjust the audio levels so that you're bringing more audio in and turning down your microphones. It sounds like your microphones are overpowering the amount of audio coming in from your computer. The other thing is make sure your computer's turned up. Your volume levels turned all the way up on your computer, and so hopefully those kind of things will help you out. Or if the audio of your intro music or the other audio clips that you're bringing in, if they're too low, go into your editing software and amplify those, and those will even be louder. So there's a couple different ways that you can do that. All right. The next one is from Ian. The JK Audio broadcast host looks great. My challenge is that I do not have a home phone. We all use our cell phones. You know what? I am going to point you to the equipment post. So let me bring that over here real quick, and I'm going to just go to A to Z using my shortcut. And if I go down, actually it's at the top now because I just answered a question there. Right here, equipment for recording a podcast. This is by the way, topic number 002. It's also linked to in the week 1 study guide. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you're going to see a question from Tom. And I said, Tom really recently asked this question. Cost is an issue, but we don't want to buy equipment that will outgrow. We want to buy the right equipment, basically. And he wanted to do phone interviews. We'll be a part of it. He has Vonage, and that system's not going to work. So here's my response. And my response is all about the fact that you could start off your show using Skype. If you don't have the money, or if you don't have the telephone line, landline for that, you can certainly use Skype to start things off and do your show that way. Now, with that being said, I am going to tell you about another device. And I do not have, or not again, but I'm going to tell you that I do not have experience with it right now. But let's see, this was the Blue, I think is it the Bluehost? Let's see, it was the Blue Keeper is what it's called. So this is the exact same device. You had the JK Audio Broadcast Host. Well, this is the Blue Keeper, and it's the same price as the Broadcast Host. The only thing is it actually hooks up to your cell phone instead of a telephone line, and it does it via Bluetooth. Now, I have not used this device, but JK Audio is telling me that it functions exactly the same way, so that could potentially be an option for you as well. All right, so if you definitely did not want to rely on Skype, and again, I know some people are thinking, but Skype, that's for only if the other person has Skype. I want to be able to do telephone interviews. And again, go to that topic that I just pointed to where I answered Tom, and you can actually make telephone calls out using Skype. In fact, I'm going to, you know what? I wonder if I can force that to quit, because I did that last time and it totally messed up my audio. So I'm not going to do it here. But anyway, just know that you can actually call Skype. All right, you can call telephone numbers using Skype and have it record. All right. Okay, Joe O'Keefe says this: what is the software you drag the audio or voicemail into? You missed that. Okay, again, it's called Soundbyte, SOUNDBYTE, at blackcatsystems.com. And again, that's blackcatsystems.com. Let me just go there again so you can see that website. Blackcatsystems.com, right there. And then you, under audio programs on the right hand side, you will see Soundbyte. All right, so there you go. I am going to pull this off and minimize that, and there we go. Okay, let's see here. Tom asks this question: in terms of a name for the podcast, do you still recommend we create a separate blog/site with the same name as the podcast, even if we already have a website and blog? Not necessarily. Let me explain to you what I would do. So, for example, gspn.tv, it is my network, all right? Now, if you go to my network, you'll see here at the very top, here's our blog. Click here to read our blog. Click here to see a list of our shows. If you click there, you can certainly go down, and it talks about all the different shows that I produce. And yes, I produce a lot of different shows, and people can go through and read, and they can actually say, okay, this Business Tech Weekly, oh, that sounds interesting. I'm going to click there to listen to that. All right. And again, it just takes them to gspn.tv/category/BizTech, BUSTECK. Now, the thing is, of course, it's talking about that episode, and it's only showing you just those episodes in that category now. Here's the situation. You could actually also go to my nav menu and go to Balanced Living, Business Tech and Technology, or Entertainment Podcast. If I go to Business and Technology, you see Business Tech Weekly, Help I Got a Mac, Podcast Answer Man. Now, the thing is, what if I was out talking with somebody face to face and it came up and it sounded to me like they would love to hear an episode of Business Tech Weekly? Well, guess what I would tell them to do? I would tell them to go to businesstechweekly.com. All right. So, and of course, this is definitely a GoDaddy thing right now, but businesstechweekly.com, they would type it in and it would pull up immediately and take them to the category on my site for Business Tech Weekly. So no, I don't have its own website. I just tell people to go to Business Tech Weekly. They could go to lostpodcast.com, and it's going to take them to the category for the Lost Podcast eventually. Seriously, come on. Crazy stuff here. Come on. This is killing me, Anyway, I promise you, that's what it would do. It would take you to the Lost Podcast. And this is not my web host, by the way. This is certainly, well, anyway, it would take you, there we go, Lost Fan Podcast. All right, to that category. So I'm not going to show you anymore because it's just going to make me frustrated to see how long that took. But anyway, what you're doing there is you just create a new category for the new show, and and I wonder if this will work this time. Talk to the dentist. I actually told them he needed to fix this, but I don't think he's fixed it yet. Let's see. Yeah, he did not. Anyway, if you go to talktothedentist.com, it literally should take you to this. It actually should take you right here to whitewolfdental.com/blog/category/podcast, and then it would take you there. But anyway, his is whitewolfdental.com. He's having his site completely redesigned right now by somebody, and they're still working out some of the kinks. But anyway, so his business name is White Wolf Dental, but he has Talk to the Dentist podcast, and yeah, you just go to talktothedentist.com and you tell your domain registrar to point it to this address. All right. Unfortunately, he doesn't have this key critical ingredient in his forwarding address. So that's what's going on there. Anyway, so hopefully that answers your question. Now, here's the situation. Check this out. If you go to my site and you browse and you look at business and technology and you look at Podcast Answer Man, now this is on my network site because it's a part of my network. Podcast Answer Man is certainly a part of my network. All right. I'm going to give you another one as an example. I'm going to go to business and technology, and I'm going to show you virtualassistantpodcast.com. So if I click on that, it takes you right to virtualassistantpodcast.com. Or it doesn't do that. It takes you right to the category. And so does the show description page. But these things do have their own site. So if I go to virtualassistantpodcast.com, same 38 episodes, all the content exactly the same. The only thing is this has its own website, as does Podcast Answer Man. So why do these two podcasts have their own sites? And it's because they are brands that actually have the oomph to stand on their own. And they are actually out there. Well, first and foremost, Podcast Answer Man is its own business. I mean, it's a subdirectory of Ravenscraft Enterprises. You know, GSPN.TV, the network, is a portion of my business, but Podcast Answer Man is an equal portion of my business. And so I don't want all of this advertising stuff of my podcasting stuff all over GSPN.TV. And when I launched Virtual Assistant Podcast, I launched a very profitable sponsor for me. And I told them one of the things that I would do is I would actually put a banner on the site that would promote them so that people come to the site during the period of time. Whenever they're a sponsor for my show, I would have a banner there that would lead them back to the site. I didn't want that on my GSPN.TV network. So I directed all the traffic to virtualassistantpodcast.com. But it's also on my network site because I want people who are just browsing all of my different shows to also see that I have those shows available. And it doesn't matter to me if they're actually finding them in which place, as long as they eventually find my content. But I'll tell you what, in virtualassistantpodcast.com, I always told people, hey, I'd love to have your comments on the blog post or where you'll find the show notes for this episode at virtualassistantpodcast.com. And did I occasionally get a comment on the GSPN.TV post in that category? Yeah, that happened every now and then. Did I ask them to go move it? No. I interacted with them where they interacted, but a majority of the stuff happened over on its own site. So there are occasions where you may want to actually have each show have its own site. I'll give you another example of this. Somebody that I just interviewed for episode 208 of Podcast Answer Man is Barry and Lynn Morgan. They have simplegoodlifenetwork.com. This is their network. This is their GSPN.TV. All right. And if you go here, you click over podcast episodes, they have Living the Simple Good Life, and they also have the Hydroponics Farmer. If you click on Hydroponics Farmer, check that out. You get their most recent episode right there, or actually it's their placeholder. Over on the right-hand side, they actually say, here's here's our subscription feeds for iTunes and RSS for Simple Good Life. Here it is for the Hydroponics Farmer. You scroll down, and there's a little thing. It says, hey, visit the Hydroponics Farmer website. You click that, it takes you right to hydroponicsfarmer.com. All right, and that pulls up, and this is their podcast Answer Man. All right, so they have a similar model. By the way, they waited at least 6 months before they launched this second show, and they're getting ready to put out their first episode. And check this out over here on the right-hand side. This is a part of the Simple Good Life Network, and if they click that, check it out. It promotes their network as well. So, yeah, you can actually do everything off of one site. You could split them off into two. It's really up to you how you want to do it. All right, but if you do have the name of your podcast, I do recommend owning the domain name. I do recommend owning the domain name for your podcast and forwarding to that place on the web where that podcast can be found, even if it's just in a subcategory on your site. Alrighty, so that was Tom. Okay, so next is Joe. Let's see. Joe says, in your equipment tutorial, you mentioned the preferred setup and then some options. If budget tight, Shure SM58 mic, small Behringer Mixer 802, and the Edirol. Or Edirol alone in a walk-in closet of clothes, okay? If I want to be taken seriously, but the Heil and Mixer are not in the budget yet, should I wait to podcast so it doesn't give me a bad impression at first impression, and maybe just start blogging for a while and create content to talk about later? Not necessarily. I want to tell you, when I started podcasting, I sounded horrible. There's nothing wrong with that, and you can certainly grow along the way. If you want to be taken seriously, if you use any of those options that I gave you, you're going to be fine. Here's where you're not going to be taken seriously. All right? If you actually record yourself as a telephone call, you will not be taken seriously. Your audio quality will just sound horrendous. All right? You could be taken seriously with a headset microphone. Remember inside the tutorial, I told you how I started out? Let me go to gspn.tv/plus-access. All right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that up here. I'm going to scroll down, not by category. I want to actually scroll by date. I'm going to go all the way down here into December of 2005. All right, and listen to this. Now, this doesn't sound great, but it's not horrible. Now, I sounded silly and stupid back then, and I sounded like a little operator who pinched their nose. But here you go. Check this out. This is Generally Speaking, a podcast production of Cliff Ravenscraft and Friends. Hello and welcome to the show. This is my very first podcast for Generally Speaking. My name is Cliff Ravenscraft. I'm in Hebron, Kentucky, and I just want to go over with you a couple things to get this thing started. First off, I want to talk to you about the format of the show. There you go. So that's what I said. That was my very first podcast ever, December 15th, 2005. I was taken seriously. I was taken seriously. And let me just show you. If you go to Amazon.com and let's see, Amazon.com, and then all of a sudden you go to Logitech USB headset. All right. And right here, I'll just pick the first one because it really doesn't matter. You could duplicate what I did there with this device plugged into your computer. All right? You can duplicate it, and you would be taken seriously, especially if you are serious about it and you follow all of the other stuff, and I think you could do really well starting off with $38.61. Now, would you sound better if you actually make an equipment investment? Let me take you over to ConnieandSheilaTalk.com. ConnieandSheilaTalk.com. We'll just go straight to episode number 50 here. All right. Oh, it happens to be an episode with me. That's funny. It doesn't matter. Actually, it does. I don't want to show you that one. I want to show you a different one. So let's do Connie and Sheila, and then let's take you to right here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just play this for a second. Here you go.
episode 53 of Connie and Sheila Talk. We're coming to you from our Thinking Rock studio in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm Connie Williams.
And I'm Sheila Tidwell.
We talk real life, real estate, real fun. And we appreciate...
There you go. Their voice sounds amazing. Would they sound better with the high LPR 40? Yeah, they would. There would be a noticeable difference between what they're using and a high LPR 40. There's no doubt about that. But they sound great. And they're using Shure SM58 microphones. Now let me show you this. I'm going to go to yourhorsecareer.com. And I'm going to take you to episode number 4. Right down, let's see this. I just want to make sure I get the right one. I'm going to go to episode number 4, which is this one. And check this out.
You are listening to the Your Horse Career Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 4 of Your Horse Career. My name is Jesse Westfall.
And I'm Stacy Westfall.
And this is the podcast dedicated to helping you find your place in the horse industry. Whether you're looking for your first career, considering a change, or looking to improve the career you already have, this show is for you.
Well, this is going to be an interesting episode because we're recording it while we're sitting on our back porch, and it is spring break, and our 3 boys are off from school this week, and we've allowed them to have 3 more boys over to spend the night. So it's hard to tell what you're going to get for background noise in this, but we thought it would be very realistic. There's a broodmare standing out here eating that's due technically on Easter Sunday, although she could go at any moment. There's boys running around with Nerf guns. There's a small dog. There's wind chimes. So we're going to give this a shot. But what we're going to do...
Now, I don't know about you guys, but I'm taking them seriously. There's nothing wrong with that. And Stacy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's 100% sitting on the back porch with just an Edirol recorder. I'm telling you, folks, this isn't rocket science, so you can do a lot, and you can. It really does come down to a lot of the other things that we're going to be talking about. Especially, I think it's right around week 2 or week 3 when you get into this thing called evaluating your podcast. All right, now. You know, you'll hear me at times. I'm very, very particular about, investing in good equipment and stuff like that. And Stacy says 100% Edirol on episode number 4, by the way. And so to answer your question, Joe, you do not need to wait. You do not need to wait at all. The only thing is if you're going to do 100% Edirol, don't do it in your office with the echo walls and the fans. I love the fact that they went on their back porch, or something like that. Just give it an ambient sound that just adds value. I mean, embrace the condenser microphones if that's what you're using. I just don't like condenser microphones that are hooked up via USB to your computer, because then you're tethered to your computer, which it comes with a fan, and then all of a sudden you just hear in the background of your show, and that's when I don't take you seriously. But even then, with that being said, that going all the way back to that first episode of my own podcast, I was hooked up to my laptop, and it didn't sound awesome, but it certainly got me started. All right. So with that being said, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting that I have this one little thing turned on up there. All right, so we're moving on to Ian. Do you share proceeds with your partners equally, or how's that set up? Contracts necessary? I take the Dan Miller approach to my business. If I can avoid a written contract, if at all, I do. And I'll tell you what, the funniest thing you'll ever see is if you were to ever see a contract that I have for my sponsorships, okay, with my sponsors. You would think it has legalese and all this other stuff. No, it doesn't. Matter of fact, it'll crack you up. In fact, you guys are all paying for this course. I'm going to show you something. I'm going to ask that you not share this information with anybody at all outside of this course. But I'll show you something, and this will kind of crack you up, I believe. So I'm just going to type in Mardell. Contract renewal for March 2011. Here's my it's a Google Doc, by the way. I put my logo up here GSPN.TV sponsor contract, my name, their name, all this other stuff. Here's the agreement. Mardel Incorporated agrees to sponsor the GSPN.TV podcast titled Family from the Heart at $200 per episode, totaling 4 episodes per month for the duration of 6 months. Sponsorship will begin during the first week of April 2011, will run through the end of September of 2011. The sponsorship is applicable for 24 episodes of Family from the Heart podcast, which will be a total of $4,800. As a call to action, for the listener, a 10% discount will be offered for those who use the promo code GSPN while in the shopping cart on the website. Payments will be made to Ravenscraft Enterprises, LLC and mailed to this address. In return for the sponsorship, GSPN.TV and Ravenscraft Enterprises, LLC agrees to place a brief host-spoken endorsement within each sponsored episode that states, and by the way, this is all I'm required to say. This episode is sponsored by Mardel.com. That's all I'm required to say. Anyway, and I am required to say you can get 10% off if you use promo code GSPN in the shopping cart. That could be my message. Anyway, this is a renewal of the previous 6 months sponsorship agreement in which we will continue to provide our contact with Mardel in the loop as to what the subject matter and the topics that are to be covered in upcoming episodes of the podcast. In the event that a proposed topic does not fit within the values of Mardel Incorporated, the company may request that we can reconsider a new topic for approval before mentioning that Mardel Incorporated is a sponsor of the show with that subject matter. Let me just say, their lawyers actually did require that I put that in there. Not once have I ever told Mardel.com what I'm talking about in advance, and we've talked about some pretty wild stuff, and I've never had a problem. But their lawyers actually did require that I go in and add that one little last line, okay? So, but anyway, that's it. I actually have them sign that, and I have them fax it to me. And that's the most legal document that I have on file for my business, other than government-required licenses and all that other good jazz. All right, so there you go. That tells you just how much. As far as going back to the original question of sharing and everything, I will tell you right now, no co-host of GSPN.TV, any show whatsoever, is reimbursed financially for anything that they provide to our network whatsoever. This is in the agreement. I will tell you this, Chris Biding, the last 3 jobs that he has received, and with every job has been a massive, and when I say the word massive, I literally mean the word massive, okay? With the last 3 position changes that Chris Biding has made, there has been a massive increase in his income. So he when he started working, he was making, X amount of dollars. He doubled his income with his next job that he got as a result of being a co-host of my show. He actually increased his income significantly higher beyond that with the next episode that he got as a result of the exposure from being on Help I Got a Mac. And the place where he's at now is it's a lot more money. Let's just put it that way. And all of those, Chris has told me, is directly tied to the exposure of Help I Got a Mac. And not to mention the fact there were several times when he was actually doing freelance work for video design work, and he got hired as the official voice, subcontracted work, but official voice for certain companies. I won't say who they are. And I know that there were some months that he made upwards of $20,000 just on the side doing some video work. So have I ever directly paid Chris Biding anything for the 160 some odd episodes that he's been on my show? No. Do you think Chris is upset about that? Absolutely not. Andy Traub is the same way. Andy's never been paid anything by me, but Andy makes a lot of money as a result of his webinars and his teaching tools and doing all kinds of projects for people where he helps them in his business of helping people with technology. He gets clients left and right as a result of that. I don't know if Eric Fisher's on here right now, but Eric Fisher actually, we started doing a show called Social Media Serenity, and there was an episode a couple weeks back where we talked about how he actually created a job for himself as a social media manager for Indiana Wesleyan University. His dream job, he made it happen, And I don't know that I would actually say that that is a direct result of his involvement in social media Serenity, although I will say that there is a significant amount of it that would be included in that. And so I always make sure that when I bring on a co-host that there's always some kind of win-win. What about Father Roderick, Balanced Living Weekly? Balanced Living Weekly. I don't pay Father Roderick anything. He doesn't pay me anything. We do this show as a joint effort. But here's the thing. He's got tens of thousands of subscribers to his network. I have tens of thousands of subscribers to my network. And guess what? We have lots of subscribers to Balanced Living Weekly, the show that we do together. And there are people who have never heard about Cliff Ravenscraft, but check out Father Roderick's show that he does with me, and all of a sudden they fall in love with the content that I'm producing. There are Catholic. See, I'm not Catholic. And there are a lot of Catholics that are listening to GSPN content, and all of a sudden they hear that I'm doing a podcast with a Catholic priest from the Netherlands. They listen to the show. They fall in love with his content. We each probably gain a couple hundred new subscribers every week to our own networks by exchanging community members. So it's a really awesome deal. So if that helps you at all to understand, where's the benefit for them. But no, I don't pay them at all. There's no money. There's no promise that there'll ever be money. And in fact, and the deal is especially you wouldn't need to worry about if your stuff's not bringing in income. But my content for GSPN.TV alone last year brought in $27,000 to $28,000 worth of income directly from the content that was being produced. And not once did my co-hosts ever feel like, wow, I really wish you would share some of that with me. And in fact, my co-hosts are my greatest advocates for trying to get people to sign up to support the content and community of GSPN. So, and certainly there are no contracts, but you may decide to try to do contracts. I'm not saying that you shouldn't. It's just my own philosophy as I don't do them. All right. So Tom says, in your case, do you have the domain name for each podcast and point the individual podcast page to point to your individual podcast page on your site? Yes, that's what I do. Although I'm not pointing to a podcast page on my site. I'm pointing to a podcast category on my site. I just want to clarify that. I think that'll make a lot more sense when you get through WordPress for Podcasters next week. All right. Ian says, do you ever plan your shows in a series format? For example, 6 weeks talking about Mac secrets followed by 6 weeks of PC problems. No, I don't typically do that. We did that with Family from the Heart when we started. We started to cover some books and stuff like that. It's like, hey, we're on, this week we're covering chapters 5 through 7. The thing is, and again, you may decide to do this, but for us, in a regular show where that's not the format, we stay away from that because we don't want people to come in, into like week 4 of 6 thinking, oh, I shouldn't listen to this one. And I just found this show and I subscribed to it and I don't have the original one. And then all of a sudden it's like, I'm not going to listen to this until I can actually have time to go back and listen to the other. But I don't know that I really want to listen to this person talk and listen, I haven't even got to know them yet to know if I want to listen to them. And so I try to stay away from those series. Now, I will tell you this, Virtual Assistant Podcast is a series of 38 episodes all devoted to a journey of podcasting. But I really never labeled it, hey, this is day 304 of my journey. No, every episode is a standalone. I try to keep every episode as a standalone because in my mind, every single episode you produce is going to be somebody's first episode that they'll ever listen to you. And I always want them to feel like, you know what, you can listen to this episode and feel like you belong here. Now, that's just my way, and that's how I do it. I'm not suggesting that you can't do that, and you might find that there's some great reasons to actually do exactly what you're talking about there, Ian. So, but since your question was, do I do it? The answer is no. All right. Let's see, Glenn. Oh, and by the way, and here's the situation. I actually keep my topics, kind of, broad and everything like that. And if I ever decide to do a series of information, I can actually package that up and sell it as a digital tutorial. All right. Okay, Glenn says serves.com, survs.com is a free account, has a free account option. Participants in this course could create surveys and then paste the short code into a discussion forum here with within the course. I'll be using this service and thought others might like to know about it. It's always good to get feedback from others when trying to make important decisions on show name, website address, and podcast format, etc. Very cool. So it looks like that's a serves.com is a survey service that you could look into using. Let's pull it up here and take a look at it. So that's serves.com, survs.com, and actually looks like a very nice looking way of doing this. Create online surveys with simplicity. Let's look at pricing and setup. You can do for free. You can have 200 responses per survey, 1 user per account, unlimited number of surveys, standard security, not normal support. That is awesome, by the way. And then for $19 a month, you could have up to 2,000 people responding to your surveys. Very good pricing. Another service that I had used was SurveyMonkey.com. SurveyMonkey.com, and I think they were just purchased by somebody. Or no, no, that's wrong. SurveyMonkey just purchased somebody else. That's what it was. All right, and if you look at their plans and pricing here, see all features. There we go. Basic is free. You get to ask up to 10 questions and 100 responses for free. With their $16.99 a month, you get unlimited questions and unlimited responses. So it looks like serves.com would give you up to 200. That if you were going for the free option, I would go with serves.com. And if you were going for a paid option, I would probably go with the $16.99 a month, unless it didn't matter which way you went. So awesome. Thank you very much for that great resource. All right. So that's from Glenn. Next is Tom. Tom says, since GoToWebinar allows recording, why do you also do a separate recording on your desktop? Is it about audio quality? Great question, Tom. And I will tell you right now that GoToMeeting does not allow me to do recording of my webinars on the Mac. They do allow you to do that on the PC. There is no option to record them on the Mac. Now, even on the PC, I want to let you know that you get the lousy Windows Media Format option is the only option for recording those. And people need a specific version of Windows Media to be able to view that, unless you actually do a separate option, which, by the way, allows it to work with any Windows Media playing device, Windows Media Player devices that will work with Windows Media Player. However, once you end your webinar, it could take hours for that to actually process and save in that format, and it's not always reliable. So that should answer the question of why I don't do it. Not to mention the fact that in ScreenFlow, I have the ability to do zooming and panning. I can make all kinds of wonderful things happen and stuff like that. But so there are several reasons why I do things the way I do, and you're gonna get that in, I think, either in week 4 or week 5. I can't remember, but we're gonna give you full access to my webinars and digital products workflow video, and that'll tell you exactly how I'm using GoToWebinar. John says, does it help having a separate domain for your podcast with the word podcast in the domain name? Does it help people find your podcast easier? Okay, if you can get the domain for your podcast without the word podcast, then get it, all right? So helpigotamac.com, go ahead and buy helpigotamac.com. You notice I don't have helpigotamac.podcast.com. I want Help I Got a Mac. Now, here's what I want to have happen. Check this out. What if I do Grey's Anatomy? Of course, I'm not going to get greysanatomy.com, right? There's no way I'm going to get greysanatomy.com for my podcast. Okay, but if I was to do, I could get greysanatomy.podcast.com. In fact, I do have greysanatomy.podcast.com. And so one of the things that I have here is, you'll notice if I do a search for Grey's Anatomy podcast in Google, number 1 is ABC. Number 2 is ABC. Number 3 is ABC. Number 4 is me. All right? And number 5 is somebody else. and all this other stuff. And so, yeah, and then there's a bunch of other ones down. Now, I will tell you the reason why I came up here is not only is the name of my show Grey's Anatomy Fan Podcast, but also this gspn.tv/category/all shows/entertainment/GAFP. Google actually sees that as this. Great, and let me just do this. I'll put a .com at the end here and then take away the spaces. And if you go to greysanatomy.com, it actually points to what Google is showing you there. And so Google knows that I own the domain greysanatomypodcast.com. And so when people are doing a search for a podcast for Grey's Anatomy, then it helps out. Now, again, we're waiting for that to forward. Again, that is totally a GoDaddy issue right now. And it's only a GoDaddy forwarding issue. Because if I was to type in, let's say, balancedlivingweekly.com, because that is not forwarded, it is automatically mapped to this domain. That's why it pulls up so quickly. But all the other domains that I have that are just being forwarded somewhere else, it looks like GoDaddy's having some issues today. Anyway, but no, having podcast in there does not necessarily help, but I'd rather have, Grey's Anatomy podcast.com instead of Grey's Anatomy show.com. All right. Joe says, in the Edirol tutorial, you said to shoot for -12 to -6 decibels. Are you watching the recorder the entire show, checking it periodically, or what? Don't want to be obsessive, but don't want to sound bad either. I actually just check it at the beginning of the show, and here's the one thing that I can tell you is that you want to make sure that you don't do this. And that what I'm doing right now is I have just turned my mouth away from my microphone. And so right now, and I come back over here, and so now if I look over here, I'm about half of where I was before, and then I come right in front of my microphone, and I look away again. Now, you guys on the telephone, you may or may not have heard the difference. I assume that you did. Those of you watching this video, you just heard a massive difference between this and this right here. This right here is me looking away from my microphone, and this is me right in front of my microphone. You have to avoid turning away from your microphone. And in fact, what I want to do is, and again, this is actually going to happen a few minutes after this happens for those of you watching live. But for those of you watching the video here, this is going to be a perfect demonstration for you. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my computer here, and I'm going to go to Applications, and I am going to go to Photo Booth right here. And I hope I fixed my hair this morning. Yeah, I guess it's not too bad. I didn't shave, though. So anyway, so here's the situation. If you let's just say this was on a tabletop mic stand, and this is what happens. It's like, yeah, I totally agree with that. And all of that stuff. But and then it's like, yeah, and so I don't know, but yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. You've got to avoid that. And if it was a tabletop mic stand, you'd always have to be humped down, and you have to actually talk into the microphone, and you would want to make sure that, if you're going to look at somebody, you're going to stay in front of the microphone all the time. Or if you needed to look over there, you would do this. Okay, yeah, I totally get what you're saying. And so I could actually move this around while I'm talking. I could say this, and I'm always right in front of the microphone. And there's a very, very low chance that you heard me moving that around, and that's because of the nice, the shock mount here and all of the other stuff. But so yeah, so when I sit back like this and I say, hey everybody, what's going on? I can lay back and kind of relax, take it easy. I could kick my feet up and still do a show, or I could be really intense and say, hey, this is what we're going to talk about today. But I'm always right up here on the microphone. And by the way, this will be a good place for me to tell you right here, mic placement right here between the microphone, end of my microphone and my mouth, that right there is less than 3 inches. So I'm always less than 3 inches away from my microphone no matter what. Once I get back here, there's a definite difference in the sound of the audio than right here. So when I'm like this, I keep it right there, and when I'm over here, I'm right here. And so I'm always right up on the microphone. All right, so there we go. We'll get rid of my pretty face and or not so pretty face. So yeah, you don't need to be obsessive. As long as you're always in front of it, once you check it in the beginning, you should be good all the way through. If you kind of sense that, maybe it's sounding like it's getting lower, then you should check your levels and make sure that you're still where you think you should be. All right? Jeremy says, hey, Cliff, so I bought the Edirol Behringer MDX 4600 and the Heil PR40 microphone. What should I get next? Well, the question for you, Jeremy, and I'll let you answer that after I answer this, is do you have a mixer? All right, so you've got an Edirol, you've got a Behringer, you've got a Heil PR40. What do you buy next? And so the question is, do you have a mixer? All right, and I'm going to leave that up there just in case I need the rest of that. Steve Vale says, if a show's mission and theme morphs and you have to change the name, is that much of a problem vis-a-vis the feeds, listings in iTunes, and also terms of SEO? SEO, yes, it will definitely be a little bit of an issue. People are going to be searching for something and they may not find you. Although, rebranding could be a very good thing to do in some circumstances. And so with that being said, you would definitely want to consider whether or not, why do you want to change the name of your brand? Now, I'm going to tell you right now, this is what you could run into. BiggestLoserPodcast.com. Check this out. What's right here? Episode 65 of Balanced Living Weekly. Add that to your Wonder List, and you can see that it's got the Balanced Living Weekly. We changed from the Biggest Loser Fan podcast to Balanced Living Weekly way back at like episode number 30 something. But here we are. We're still posting both. We post every episode both to the Balanced Living or Biggest Loser podcast site, and we're also doing it to Balanced Living Weekly. Now, eventually, I'll probably actually go in and put a big, huge note and make the final episode on the old podcast site saying, hey, this is the last episode we're putting on the Biggest Loser feed. We've been doing this show as Balanced Living Weekly for quite some time now. We encourage you to go ahead and go over to balancedlivingweekly.com and subscribe to the podcast using that feed, and stuff like that. Now, another show that I had was My Crazy Life. I had a show called My Crazy Life. I did 385 episodes of My Crazy Life, and then I changed it to Pursuing a Balanced Life. And I had to. As far as changing the feed and the name of the site and the domain, none of that's very difficult at all. But man, I'll tell you, it's not fun to think about. Are people going to recognize the change afterwards and all this other stuff? But for me, I did that because over the course of several years, over the course of 385 episodes, I always hovered around 200 people who were interested in hearing me talk about My Crazy Life. But the thing is, nobody in iTunes who found it would actually be interested. Who's going to be interested in Cliff's Crazy Life? They have no idea who Cliff is. So I changed the name of the podcast to Pursuing a Balanced Life. And as soon as I did that, I mean, literally, I jumped up to 1,000 subscribers probably within a couple weeks, and all of a sudden it's like they got it. It's and you know what? The content never changed. It's this I'm almost, I don't even know what I'm on right now. Pursuing a Balanced Life. Let me do link PABL. Type that in there and find out what episode. I think I'm almost on episode 500 and whatever. Let's try that one more time. Anyway, we'll let that pull up. But I think I'm almost on episode 500 of that podcast, and the content has been the same since the first episode, 496. It's always been me sharing my journey of pursuing a more balanced and healthy lifestyle, and so yeah, it's just that's what it's always been. But because I picked a better name for my show, people started to understand. It's like, yeah, I want to pursue a balanced life. And I'm gonna listen to this, and all of a sudden they hear me. They have no idea who I am yet, but they actually say, you know what, this guy, I get the feel from the name of his show that he's pursuing a more balanced, healthy lifestyle. And I'm listening to this guy, and he's like, wow, he's got some ideas there. He's actually moving forward, progressing, and that's how they get to know me. And so where My Crazy Life was a barrier for people to get through, Pursuing a Balanced Life was a better name. So yeah, sometimes you just have to do that, and I could care less about SEO at this point because I wanted a better show name, and so I went with one. I don't know what AT&T ? Is, David, but if you want to ask that question, let me know. Glenn says, I have to leave, very full work schedule. I'll catch the rest once the video is available to our group. Glenn, I'm glad you were able to stop by for at least a little while today. Disregard the last question, David says, no problem at all. Stacy says, how did you set up GSPN.TV site to house all of those? Is it all in one of the tutorials? I'll tell you what, if it's not clearly laid out for you in WordPress for podcasters, do me a favor. When you get into week 2, there is going to be a topic that's going to include the link to WordPress for podcasters. It is talked about in that episode, how I've done all of that. It's all categories. That's all it is. It's one site with a lot of different categories. And so again, after watching WordPress for podcasters, if you don't understand, let me know and I will come back and answer in week 2. All right. Stacy says, I want to include a training tip on my podcast, and I'm wondering if I should have the legal speak at the end like Dave Ramsey does, where would I go to get this simple but legal sounding stuff. Stacy, I hate to sound overly simplistic, but I would suggest talking to a lawyer. I know nothing about legal anything. All right, and I would be the last person to ask about legal stuff. So certainly, that is something that you probably should consider, especially when people are. I should probably have some legal stuff, but I don't. But hopefully, people aren't going to get lose a finger on their mixer or something like that. One of the things people keep asking me, Cliff, how do I get rid of that buzzing sound? I'm using my laptop, and whenever I plug my audio from my laptop into my mixer, I get this horrible buzzing sound. But I find if I unplug my power cord, it goes away. Well, the only advice I'm willing to give to those people is, well, hopefully you've got a good battery and you can actually keep your laptop going off of the battery power while you're recording your show. Now, what I won't give as advice, I will occasionally tell people that what I've done, but I will tell them, you should not do this. Now, you do whatever you want in your life, but I'm going to tell you right now, my recommendation is that you do not do this. But I happen to know people who have taken a pair of pliers and went to their plug and have broken off the ground plug, that little third plug at the bottom. I know people who have taken that off, and all of a sudden, boom, that sound doesn't happen anymore, and you can still continue to charge your battery. I'm going to tell you here, don't do it. I don't know if the insurance company will pay for your house if it burns to the ground. I have no idea. So I recommend that you don't do that. But I'm just saying, I've heard people do that. But I recommend just getting a good battery with your charger. So I try to be very cautious about the things I say, but who knows? I could lose this all one day due to a lawsuit. But sometimes I take things too easy. So Andy Traub is awesome, is what David says. He is awesome. All right, Greg says, as Steve Covey says, begin with the end in mind. If we want to build a podcast network over time, as you have, would you recommend doing the layout of it, such as domains, etc., as you have, or would you do it differently? Said another way, if you had to do it over again, would you do it differently? Thanks, Greg. Greg, you know what? I would not start off with a network. I wouldn't say that you have to. Now, because Barry and Lynn Morgan, they knew that they were going to do a network. I mean, there was just no question at all. So we did that for them. We did simplegoodlifenetwork.com. And the name of their first podcast was called Living the Simple Good Life. All right. And so Living the Simple Good Life was the name of their show. It was the first podcast on their network. And the only place that you can find Living the Simple Good Life is at simplegoodlifenetwork.com. I don't even know if they have, let's see if they have Living the Simple Good Life.com. Let's see if they even own that. They probably do, knowing them. They're smart people. And No, actually, it looks like somebody else owns livingthesimplegoodlife.com. So with that being said, they actually chose to do theirs as a network first. Now, when they brought on Hydroponics Farmer, yes, they went that way. So yeah, you could do it. You could create it as a network at first. Though if you're going to start off, it's up to you. I think that's a personal choice. But me personally, if I had a niche topic, like for example, if I was starting from scratch today and the very first podcast I was going to do was HungerGamesPodcast.com, would I launch that as GSPN.TV and make Hunger Games a category off of it? No way. Not a chance. I would actually start it off with HungerGamesPodcast.com, and my site would not be anything other than Hunger Games. It would be Hunger Games from beginning to end. I'm completely devoted to this project. That's what I want to communicate to my audience. As far as they're concerned, my audience for this podcast, I don't want them to think that I even have another interest outside of Hunger Games. I want them to think that I'm that diehard passionate about it. So I think there's a lot of value in being focused, and then all of a sudden, if Hunger Games is my first show, but now, I'm ready 6 months later to launch my second show, now it's time for me to think about creating that network site, starting to combine things around, and there's a couple different ways you can do it at that time. All right. Jeremy says, no, I have not picked up a mixer yet. So with the fact that you have purchased an Edirol, a Behringer 4600, and a Heil PR40, your next purchase then would be the mixer. That would be your next logical purchase. So, and I personally, for you, because you do have the Behringer MDX 4600, you will need a mixer that has insert cables. Or insert cable ports on it. And I'm going to highly recommend that you get the Mackie mixer, the Mackie 1202 VLZ3 or the 1402 VLZ3. Either one of those two mixers is what I recommend. I actually do sell either one of those if you're interested in buying them from me. I believe I just put the price in the equipment list, in the equipment topic, but it's $299. It's $299 for the 1202 mixer, and it's $429 for the 1402 mixer. So either one of those mixers will be good for you, and it would definitely be the next purchase I would recommend. All right. So let's see here. Laughing out loud. And Steve says, I know you will cover this more when we get into the DAW, which I'm not sure right now what DAW is. But anyway, keeping in mind the age-old recording engineer's adage, you can't polish garbage, usually with stronger language. Okay. How much can we improve the sound of our sound with our editing software? I will tell you right now, what you start with is pretty much what you're going to end with. There is a lot of things you can try to do with editing software to clean things up. Honestly, I think you do more. Okay, digital audio workstation. Okay, anyway, the more you try to use processes to clean up your audio, such as taking out hisses and clicks and pops and stuff like, you're just going to degrade the quality of your audio overall. So the important thing is to do your best to get the cleanest audio from the beginning as your original. And really only use editing software to do things like deleting sections, amplifying, and stuff like that. That's my own approach to it. So, and then you said, just for now, give us a 1 to 5 stars for how much we can do with Audacity, GarageBand, and Adobe Audition. And thank heaven Audition for the Mac is currently available, or is now on the Mac finally, after being Windows only for so long. Okay. So here's what I'm going to say. If I did not have $349 to plop down for Adobe Audition, if I was a Mac user or if I was a PC user, I personally would be using Audacity. All right, that's what I personally would use. Now, I want to tell you there are reasons why GarageBand is actually a better tool for Mac users than Audacity, but Audacity is easier, and I hate GarageBand's method of rubber bands and all kinds of other crazy stuff that they do. I use the other side of the brain that does not operate in the Apple way when it comes to GarageBand. Now, with that being said, GarageBand has some features and functionalities that make it a great software solution for people who think that way. I have a tutorial that will be included for you guys next week called GarageBand 101, Audacity 101, and Adobe Audition 101. And all of those are great options for you to choose from. The only thing is I'm going to tell you right now, I would not recommend any other recording software, or I'm sorry, editing software than those three. No, don't even bother with anything else, because if you're there's really no reason to. My personal preference, I think Adobe Audition is the best. It is 5. I mean, it's 10 stars out of 5 in my book. All right, so you can see, yes, I love Audition. Audacity is a good 4.5-star program. GarageBand is a good 4 and 4. It's just below. It's just below Audacity, although some features actually make it greater than Audacity. So they're both 4+ stars, or all three of them are 4+ stars. So I would say whichever one you choose to use, you're gonna love. You'll be fine with it. All right. So there we go. Is there a link on the A to Z group for what cables we need for setting up a Behringer 4600 Mackie mixer, Heil Behringer headphone amp, and Roland digital audio recorder, or do they come with cables? They do not come with cables needed. I tell you what, this is coming from John. I would go through, if you have the Behringer MDX 4600 video, that is going to show you all of those cables you'll need. All right. And if you have a specific mixture, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. All right. First and foremost, I'm going to ask you to please watch the Behringer MDX 4600 video to see if that will answer your question. If it does not answer your question, do me a favor and look for topic number 002, equipment for recording a podcast. Please go to this box right here at the top. Type in the list of equipment that you have and say, I've watched the MDX 4600 video, and I still have questions, or I'm not using the MDX 4600 in my chain. If you're not using the MDX 4600 in your chain at all, but you have a list of equipment and you want to know how to hook it up and what cables to purchase, put your list of equipment here and say, can you please tell me what cables I'll need? I will draw you a diagram, or I'll do something, and I will tell you and give you a label of all the cables. All right? So I will do that. Post those questions as a new question at the top of the page on topic number 002. All right? Everybody else says thanks, and I'll tell you what, we are at a full 2 hours on this, so I am going to wrap it up and say thank you. Hopefully this has been extremely valuable for you guys, and look forward to another full week of answering your questions starting next Monday. And let's see here. I think that's it. Anyway, thank you guys, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.